Joining us now is Raphael Sonenshein. He's the executive director of the Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs at California State University, Los Angeles. Thank you for joining us again, Dr. Sonenshein. President Biden setting a new standard for executive orders. He's undoing so many of the ones that his predecessor enacted. What's your take on the first, 36 hours in office?
Well, Joe Biden's been a big surprise. Nobody ever confused him with somebody bold, but this is one of the boldest beginnings to a presidency I've ever seen. He's basically reversing one after another elements of the Trump administration and left himself the room to do a lot more. And he's got a fairly gigantic plan for fighting the virus and getting vaccines out, which I don't think anybody really anticipated he'd go so big and so bold. I think it's the right approach, but I guess we're a little surprised that he had it in him.
Right. Well, today, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy of Southern California, he changed his tune. He says he now does not believe former President Trump incited the insurrection at the Capitol. What do you think about, he's changing his tune. How are Republicans positioning themselves now that Biden is president, now that the impeachment is looming? What is that changing in terms of the dynamic and the former president's grip on the party?
Well, they have the same problem they've always had. They'd rather just be the minority party that can get in the way of the president's program, but Donald Trump keeps getting in their way. And Donald Trump controls enough of the party that they can't get him too mad. And Kevin McCarthy got Trump mad at him. Trump is now mad at Kevin McCarthy for saying he bore some responsibility for the rioting that occurred. So they're back where they've been for the last 4 years, which is trying to do their thing, get their work done, and not get Donald Trump's base angry. And I haven't figured out quite how they're going to square that circle when more evidence comes out about what happened at the Capitol 2 weeks ago.
What does this do for bipartisanship if the former president still has a grip on the Republican Party and the Republican base, and these senators and congressmen are still beholden to that base? What does that do in terms of bipartisanship and the possibility of compromise, especially on this COVID-19 relief package?
Well, bipartisanship has always been more the exception than the rule. But in this case, there'll be a lot of pressure from the Republican base to give Joe Biden nothing. But there'll be a lot of pressure from the country as a whole to give him quite a bit, especially given that most of the things he's proposing now are extremely popular. This is, again, the problem the Republicans have, which is cooperating with Biden is not good in their intra-party interest, but the public wants action, and they want a strong federal response to the virus, and they want vaccines. And I think that's going to come from a real change. I think a lot of them may end up supporting some of the big $1.9 trillion program, which, by the way, he may not need Republican votes for in the Senate, since it could be under the budget reconciliation, which only requires 50 votes.
Right. So when you look at it that way, and the fact that Kamala Harris is the tiebreaker on so many of these sorts of votes, does that obviate the need for bipartisanship on a lot of legislation, or is it is, I suppose it's something you still want to try for?
You have no choice but to try for it, and you can put your hand out. The hand may get bitten, but you have to, because on most legislation, it still takes 60 votes in the Senate with the filibuster, and Joe Manchin of West Virginia still is saying that he was reluctant to remove the filibuster, which would take 50 votes. He's the Democrat from West Virginia. So until that gets resolved, the Democrats are going to really have to work hard to get 10 Republican votes for most regular non-budget legislation. The Republicans don't want to block everything, though, because that could force the Democrats to unite to get rid of the filibuster, which is the absolute last thing the Republicans want. So the game is to give the Democrats enough to keep them from getting so angry that they get rid of the filibuster.
All right, Ray Sonenshein, thank you again for joining us from the Pat Brown Institute for Public Affairs at Cal State LA.